personally, I'm looking at these emerging markets to see how they fill their orders and if they're filling their orders. Where they usually buy X amount, they're getting X minus that amount. And that's how we can see what's going to happen here as people bid prices up.
And because the Arab Spring was sparked by the exact same thing you just described, but this time it seems like it's going to get more intense and prices even higher.
It's the same amount of people, a little bit more, now competing for 80% less corn, 80% less wheat. So prices will just go up from there. And then it's not a supply chain disruption. It is a scarcity disruption where the food is not getting to the market.
And good afternoon, everyone. Special interview here from a retired 30-year grain trader decided to come to discuss what may happen with the prices as we see the world now in a grain deficit. Exportable commodities far less than they have been in what we consider the last 100 plus years, except for a world war. Take what you can out of the conversation in terms of information, and at the request of my contact, to keep the voice and information anonymous. Location, this is a very touchy subject, and it does seem that an enormous amount of people know what is happening, but this is being kept out of the media. So I am going to change the voice the best I can to remove distortion, but still give you a clear picture of what is happening. And I welcome you to Mini Ice Age Conversations podcast. The electricity, so it's really getting too expensive for them to produce then. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, no, what it is he has 3 grow houses in Oklahoma. And the grow houses, when he first built them, the electricity was really cheap, but now it's costing him like $24,000 a month. And, the price of wholesale marijuana has gone down, so it's really difficult for him now to make ends meet.
Yeah, how many places is that going to occur across all business here? Hey, so anyway, I've been taking notes, getting ready for our talk here, and I'm thank you. I know
no problem.
You're super busy and everything, and I'm really trying to get this straight so I can talk smartly about moving forward.
Okay, yeah, we'll go over everything.
I've been hearing a lot of different growers that I know and those in the cattle industry in California talking about not being able to get rail traffic to send grains over to California. They had a 20% reduction, even though they bought 3 years forward out on rail capacity. They were nixed on their capacity. They just one day woke up and they're like, you're going to get a cut 20%. Correct me if I'm wrong here. So let's say a base company like Pillsbury or Cheerios or any of these Kraft and these kind of, multinational food manufacturers. If the CME or the Chicago Board of Exchange or CBOT cannot deliver the grains to people who want to buy them coming up here in September as the first delivery month coming in, what's going to happen to the actual rest of the business world? Because the way it was kind of phrased to me was, if those who are doing business cannot be guaranteed to at least get the base material for their operations to manufacture, if something's wrong with the futures market and they can't deliver, call force majeure, Humpty Dumpty breaks and it ain't coming back together again. And then business around the world is going to have to adjust to that, and farmers will too if they know they can't get the grains to offset for things that they might need to deliver on contract. Is there any base and merit to that? I mean, what would happen business structurally wise if the function and the form of the futures market changes because there's more people wanting to take physical delivery this year than there ever was in human history, apparently?
You've had it before, like you said, force majeure. You had it in natural gas. You had it in cocoa going back a few years ago, where basically if they can't deliver, they'll invoke that clause. But now they still need the product. So where do they go get it?
The problem begins, and this is where we march into September. not March,
Yeah.
but September.
So once they get out of the paper contract and they invoke that, they still need the product to produce. So where do they get it now?
That's the $50,000 question. Where do they get it?
What they'll do is they'll go into the next month and they'll bid it up and try to do another delivery in the next month. Or they'll go into the cash market and just distort the cash market and bid it up because they have contracts to make, they have factories that have to keep on moving. They'll just go in the cash market, and what they may do is go outside of the futures and just deal with the actual people on a peer-to-peer type of situation, where they'll go to the grain elevators, let's say for the grains, where they'll go exactly to where it is, warehouses, and they'll just go there and pick it up themselves.
We're talking about a whole new logistics chain forming to do something like that.
Because then the market's broken. The whole thing with the futures markets and the markets is that they buy in and they get delivery. But if they're not able to guarantee delivery and they're invoking that, they'll go right to the warehouses and the grain silos and buy it direct and, hire trucks, deliver it to me. I need it. Oh, it'll get ugly. And because of that, now you have all these extra added costs. Prices will go up, and they'll go up tremendously.
What type or percentage of factories do you think might close because they couldn't get that base food material in there? It could be wheat, it could be corn, soy.
I've noticed lately a lot of empty store shelves. Have you noticed that too?
They're spotty, and then some areas are just, they've tried to reduce the size of the aisles, or they spread things out to make it look like there's more in the store.
I've seen here, they'll have whole, and it's mostly surprisingly, it's in the refrigerated section, where whole areas of the refrigerated section are just empty.
That's not normal for us here in the United States.
No, that's not normal. And then you'll see just empty shelf blocks. So it's already starting. It's more than just this, what they want to explain away as the supply chain disruption. I think it's just a lot of these guys don't want to produce at the current prices. So I noticed it the other day. I went to go buy my usual box of the packaged oatmeal, Quaker Oats. It used to be 10 bags in the box. It's 8 bags in the box for the same price.
We call that shrinkflation.
So they're doing that. And the guys that haven't done that yet, they're not making deliveries because they really don't want to sell because they're going to lose money between transportation and raw material costs. I think that's the real reason why the shelves are empty.
At what point do they raise the prices to try to keep up with the inflation and all these things we just talked about? I mean, at what point does it get demand destruction on the consumer side where I look at it and go, oh, holy smokes, no way I'm paying that much?
It's like in the 70s, they used to talk about sticker shock. When they saw the price and they're like, whoa, no way, I'm not buying this. I don't think we're there yet because they're doing the shrinkflation, like you said. So they're keeping the prices the same. They're just shrinking the amount. After a while, they can only shrink so much. Then they're going to have to start upping the prices.
Then we're right back over to the grains not getting delivered through the contract. So what happens to these holders of the contracts? Because I do believe that one time that you were talking about the fines per day on clearinghouses that couldn't close their physical contracts, as well as the farmers who couldn't close on the physical aspects.
If you can't deliver on the sell side, if you can't deliver on a futures contract, there's a massive fine per contract. It could be sometimes as much as $250,000, as I've seen for certain contracts. I saw it in soybean oil. If you cannot deliver, they will charge you a fine. If you can't pay it, they will charge the clearing firm that fine. That's to invoke everybody satisfies their contracts on the short side. So let's say these guys are paper short and you run into the situation, they can't deliver, they don't have the money, the clearing firm's going to have to pay it, or they're going to somehow invoke the clause to get out. Once you invoke that, like in natural gas, then you destroy the whole market.
And then what happens to the prices from that point forward? There's really no structure in it. It's just
There's no structure. There's no real price discovery. No one wants to use it anymore, and they just go direct to the producer then and cut them out. But then when you go direct to the producer, there's no price discovery, so you have prices just all over the place.
So that $250,000, is that a per day basis, or is that just for the contract life?
For the contract, if you cannot make delivery.
And then on a typical, I'm just saying a typical average, these clearinghouses are holding how many contracts? Because I know I was doing a little research on that. I saw about 350,000 contracts per day moving through there, through Chicago.
The clearing firms, you have certain limits, so they're not exposed that much. I know in soybean oil, the limit per clearing firm is 600 contracts. That was a while ago. They may have updated, but as far as I know, the most that a clearing firm can have on going into delivery is 600 per clearing firm. The whole idea with the delivery process is you shouldn't rely on the delivery for the actual product. When guys start going into the delivery process, that means they can't get it anywhere else. When you see a lot of volume coming into the delivery process, that's not good.
Yeah, and they're looking at massive delivery now too, and they can't get the rail traffic nor the barge traffic. So a second knock-on question would be, where are all the barges gone to, these flat-bottom barges? And I do believe St. Louis to load down there, like where are the barges? How is there suddenly a barge traffic? Those things used to be stacked up. I want to cross the Mississippi a couple of times off of Memphis over into Arkansas. There's like, you can see them all up and down the river. Like they're everywhere. They're like gnats and mosquitoes in the middle of summer. Like where do they all go to? They're gone suddenly.
I tell you, I haven't seen them. I don't know what dried them up. Is it just the cost of diesel? Has that like sidelined a lot of them?
Well, if they're sidelined, they should still be sidelined along a bank of a river or somewhere that you could actually physically see them floating on the water surface.
It's like they mysteriously disappeared. There's very little rail traffic going on. The other thing is it could be like I know the Germans now are stockpiling. They're stockpiling natural gas because they're afraid. It just came out recently that if they don't get Russian natural gas, they're going to freeze during the winter. So with that, they could be stockpiling food a lot of these places.
So what about the farmer then? Because you were saying also contract fines for non-delivery for farmers. So how's that going to hit?
Farmers usually have the product to deliver, and they'll go short into it, and they can always close it out. It's only when you get caught short and you don't have access to the actual physical commodity, that's when you get fined. So they have the product. And they'll go in there and they can always close, you can always close it out, but it's when you get caught and the market's rallying up and you don't have it, you have a problem with the exchange. And then if you cannot settle it, then it goes into the clearing firm. You probably know more about this. And one of the things that I've been noticing is that you've had these bank runs in China lately. Have you seen those?
Sure have. Been following it very closely.
The bank runs in China, I've noticed people don't want to pay for their real estate any longer. This is all part of the breakdown.
What percentage of these holders do you think are going to get stuck with contracts on the fines? And then how many of them does it take before it really starts to ripple through our banking industry? Because these clearinghouses or clearing firms are just basically branch arms of other well-known banks.
So a good one was what happened earlier this year in March in the nickel market at the LME. They were short and they had a different grade to delivery of nickel. and they got caught with that. And the exchange basically had to shut the market down. I think they shut it down for a total of 7 trading days, so almost a week and a half. They shut down the trading there, and a lot of people lost a lot of money. There's lawsuits floating all over around the place now, and it's just a mess. And now no one wants to trade the product, and LME volume has gone down significantly.
And there's this little device right here, 4-in-1 aircon. Electric companies don't want you to know about this. Put your ice and your water right in here. Turn on the fan and cool down. I use this when I go camping. If we have electric at the campsites, heat pump broke one time. We were waiting for 3 days, 90 degrees here in East Tennessee. Use this in our room, and it actually did cool us down where we could get comfortably to sleep. Turn it on. That hum means cool air coming your way. Learn more by going to easysummercool.com. That link's in the description box below. And now on with the rest of the video. That was just one clearing firm with one metal product.
Yeah, that was one clearing firm on one side, on the short side, and then all the longs that saw it coming, they couldn't make delivery. They didn't have it to deliver. No one would loan it to them to deliver. And the market just basically spiked up tremendously. I think it got as high as 125,000 a ton before they stopped. They had to stop trading.
Yeah, that was like a 25x increase in a matter of days. It went from 3,000 or 4,000 up to 125,000. Yeah. What would you anticipate with grains doing the same thing? Okay, soybean or corn, or more on the corn, not so much the wheat in September, but
no one really needs nickel. They're not going to eat nickel, but when we start getting into the foodstuffs that you can't make delivery, then it's going to get nuts.
And what kind of reverberations are going to roll through the market, do you think, in terms of awareness of, okay, everything's broken on the base commodities for food, for factory producers, and you, the consumer, they probably won't understand as much, because I've been studying after you've given me the breadcrumbs to go out and look for this information here. But I mean, are we talking a complete meltdown of the market, and how are they going to restructure? Is it going to be worse than 2008, or are they just going to completely evaporate the market and start with a new mechanism moving forward after this?
When food, what they may have to go to is they would have to go back just going direct to the producer. And that adds another whole other host of other costs where you can't hedge it. Farmer can't hedge it. They sign long-term contracts with maybe some clause that it'll go up. But here you have rising prices because of high inflation. Oh, it just becomes a mess. And then it's not a supply chain disruption. It is a scarcity disruption where the food is not getting to the market.
Let's say we did go down that road, and producers are going off and talking to individual farmers, buying silos of grain, et cetera. Then what happens to what was formerly the middleman of this whole mechanism that moves the grains around the world? Then what happens to that whole section of finance?
Yeah, you have the middleman, you have the transportation sector. They just all start to get pushed out. But also now they're only feeding the larger markets. They're not going to the other markets. So it's always nice to be next to farms. If you're next to farms, you should be fine, because they'll always have it there, especially if there's a transportation problem. But, in some of these big cities, they're not going to be, I think in New York is one, all the food there, I think it's 500 miles or more to transport to major markets. Like, that becomes a nightmare for them. You could see it. And it's not even a food stuff. You could see it with Pampers, baby formula. Those things are already drying up.
Do you think that could trigger a bank holiday like it was with the LME stopping trading for 7 days? Okay, that was just purely and strictly on that one commodity within the futures and commodities market. But do you think a meltdown like this on the food side could actually trigger something else much, much larger that would affect the entire financial system.
It most definitely will spread because now you're going for the basic food stuff.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to see that, but I can envision us having food riots, food not showing up at supermarkets.
It hits the supermarkets. What's the lag time that how quickly would that manifest?
I think we'll start to see it in the emerging market first. You'll see it break out in Egypt first. They're big grain buyers. Any place that's a big grain buyer, you'll see it first because they won't start filling orders there. We'll see it in those markets. Turkey, big grain buyers, big soybean buyers. We'll see it happen there first.
Ukraine's a great example. They do supply Egypt with a lion's share of their imports for wheat. Now that's not available at all, and none of the corn's coming, and none of the sunflower, which they reliably use for cooking oils. So you're trying to go to a secondary market or a secondary supplier, and then they're all dried up because everybody ran to them at the exact same time. And then you go to that, third supplier, the tertiary supplier, and you just keep getting, okay, what are you going to come to my little farm over here and go, David, can we have your 2 acres of corn or something?
Yeah, well, what'll happen is that the Egyptian authorities will have to continue to raise their prices at the second supplier and the third supplier. And that's going to make prices go up because the second supplier will say, well, I already have all my commitments. Egypt will say, well, we'll pay you 20% over, fill our order. And they're like, well, let me go back to this guy. And that guy says, no, contract states this, I'll pay you more. And then you just get a bidding war for food, which is a total catastrophe.
That overlaps back into, with grain trader, with the traders bidding it up for the next delivery month. So it doesn't matter. It seems like macro, micro are coming in the same exact circumstance.
Exactly. It's going to become scary times, especially. So like the first domino to fall will probably be Egypt. And then Turkey's another big buyer. Wherever they are on the edge, the emerging market that buys stuff, they're going to all compete for whatever's left over now that the Russians have taken that supply off the market.
So if we're looking at delivery months here, you'd mentioned September and December as big as some of the most major delivery months that are out there.
November for beans. We'll start to see those, and we'll see how this delivery goes. Personally, I'm looking at these emerging markets to see how they fill their orders and if they're filling their orders. Where they usually buy X amount, they're getting X minus that amount. And that's how we can see what's going to happen here as people bid prices up.
And because the Arab Spring was sparked by the exact same thing you just described, but this time it seems like it's going to get more intense and prices even higher.
The same amount of people, a little bit more, now competing for 80% less corn, 80% less wheat. So prices will just go up from there. And then you're going to get a lot of hoarding from countries. I saw as soon as some of the grain producers in Europe, some of the smaller ones, they said they're not going to be exporting. They're going to keep it internal because they're afraid for their own food safety. So they're not going to export. You're going to get more of that.
That export embargo, once that starts to take hold, the food nationalism is another term I've heard that called. At what point do we get where every nation's like, no, what we grow is what we keep? We don't want to get into food riots too. So you know what? Exactly. Sorry, man, we can't deliver to you.
Yep. So we can't fill your order. Sorry about that. And they start going down the list. As they go down the list, they're bidding the market up. But, let's go 50% over market prices, I'll pay.
Do you think that we could come into a time where it'll actually go from, I'm not talking forever, but a couple of weeks where the globe will say everybody had stopped exporting, where there's a complete lockup for a week or two? I wouldn't anticipate it for months, plural, but until something dislodges at that point? Do you think it could go to that point where everything's nationalism, export embargoes on every nation, and then finally there's some kind of tilt and the pendulum swings the other way?
I could see them if things get really tight coming into the emerging market buyers. Yeah, they'll become very nationalistic. They don't want to export any grains, any livestock, anything, because they're worried for their own community melting down. So they'll just start to hoard on a national basis. At least we have all this milk and cheese that's in storage.
Yeah, just like the strategic oil reserves, we have the strategic food reserve. I think they had 1 billion pounds of butter, but in reality, who's going to get access to that? If really there is a meltdown and a non-delivery, and we're talking everything's playing out as you and I are sort of talking here, at what point do they release those food reserves, and then who gets privy to it? Are they going to take it out and then deliver it off to your local Kroger or Ingles or whatever your local store is, Food Lion, or I don't know, there's a million stores? Or is it only going to be for Costco and that's it?
They'll probably do is I remember in the 70s and the 80s they did do the milk, cheese, and butter. Trying to remember everything from the 70s and how they tried to resolve it back then. It's going to be much more difficult times than that. Remember, in the 70s, we were still a big oil producer, and we were until recently. We need to go back to that.
Yeah, so the timeline of when these holders of the contracts are going to hit the force majeure or hit the non-delivery, and what's that one lever that's going to tip everything into the full? We don't use the traditional markets anymore. We can't rely on them, so they're going to move over to direct supply. Like, what's that trigger event that would set that cascade off?
I would think the first delivery, the first grain delivery, that they issue a force majeure on it, then it'll just seize up. We can look at Russia and how things go in Russia. If it starts to November, December, over the next few months, over the next 6 to 8 months, yes.
So how would people get ready? What would you buy if you were going to be just a regular person prepping for this event and it's inbound at some point? What kind of things would you think about getting to protect yourself and your family? I mean, you got family. What would you be buying to get you all ready over there?
Just what I've been doing already, getting all the basic necessities and stocking up as much as I can, putting anywhere I can. Canned food, flour. I mean, I've been buying flour now for the last 6 months and stacking it up. You know why? Because I was laughing with my son. I'm like, you know what? These are not cans of potatoes you're looking at. This is money in the bank.
Well, you go back through history, and you're a fan of history. I know you study the trends and the cycles. I mean, through history, how much has food been tradable for in one of these scenarios?
We never thought that this war would break out with the Russians. And it's kind of gone quiet now, but the Russians are still going about their business there and claiming more territory and still fighting.
What are you hearing about European grain production? Anything on that side? Because here, some of the crop tours are coming out, and especially the North Dakota, they're down at 30% right now when they should be, late high 60s, low 70s for heading out on the grains on the durum wheat.
From what I've heard, there's a lot of warehousing of grains coming out of Europe. They don't want to put it on the market. A lot of it is staying warehouse there. They're not selling it on the open market, what we were talking about, the nationalistic one. So they'll wait to see what the shakeout looks out, so they're taking even more product off. You have the product that's been taken off from the Russians. Now you have this nationalistic one where they're taking more product off. Let's say they're growing 100, they're keeping 50 to 75 in the warehouse just in case we need it.
And then when the price would reach a certain point, they would just throw everything into the market.
They can do that, but most likely they're keeping it for their own population for now.
Wow, you painted such a rosy picture for the holidays.